Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann, and I just got a new phone. So we're gonna try recording this on my phone and see how it goes, because I am traveling. I'm in my mom's house, and I don't know, my computer's suffering and being slow and whatever. So we're trying with the phone. So today I am here with my June reading wrap up. I'm only 2 weeks late. I might look at my computer, which is over here, to see some of my notes. But yeah, so let's dive into it. So in June, I read 6 books, two of which I've already talked about. So I will start with the 4 that I haven't talked about before. So first I want to talk about Blood of the Lily by S.D. Huston. And this is the first book in her trilogy Clash of the Goddesses. And S.D. Huston is an author tuber who makes content about her writing journey and writing tips and tricks, etc. right here on YouTube. So I was really excited to give her books a try. And the Clash of the Goddesses series is it's sort of a blend of a few different genres or subgenres, I think. I mean, first and foremost, it is fantasy. I think she wrote it for more of a young adult audience, but I didn't feel like it was really just for that audience. Like, I got a lot out of it as an adult reader. And it's also a little bit of a retelling. So it's based on the classic story of Snow White and Rose Red, which was really interesting because that's a story that I've always felt like is just really short. Like, I could never imagine turning it into a novel or using it as the basis of a novel. It's just incredibly short. It's 2 sisters and some adventures that they have with a surly gnome or leprechaun, and eventually there's a prince involved. Yeah, so S.D. Huston sort of starts with that premise, but she makes it a triplet of sisters, and 2 of them are based on Snow White and Rose Red, but then there's a 3rd sister, Marigold. And in this first book, just immediately at the opening, we know Marigold has died really recently. She's died about a year prior to the action that takes place in this book. And her sisters, and now I'm blanking, Lily, obviously, Lily and Rose. Lily is Snow White and Rose is Rose Red, in terms of the classic fairy tale. So they are, sort of dealing with the aftermath of that and getting their lives back together. And this takes place in ancient Ireland, I guess maybe the Middle Ages, Dark Ages, when the Romans are around, Roman times. And Lily in particular has been really struggling with the death of her sister. And so this first book focuses on Lily, and starts with some really familiar things from the Snow White and Rose Red fairy tale, but then the story really unspools from there. And the Clash of the Goddesses series title should kind of give it away that there's going to be a lot of mythology brought in, and our characters are getting sort of slowly wrapped up into a little bit of a conflict and competition between some of these different mythologies and some of these different goddesses. And so, yeah, I just thought it was a really creative blend of some of the well-known mythologies, some creative interweaving of stories and elements that I was familiar with, and so I really enjoyed reading this book, and I'm looking forward to moving on to the next book in the trilogy, which I already own and just need to get to. Okay. Then I've also read The Source of Magic by Piers, which is book number 2 in the Xanth series. And I've been starting to work through this series inspired by John over at Hey Y'all Listen Up, because this series is one of his favorites of all time. I guess maybe his favorite of all time. And they're just light and fun. They're very, 1970s, sort of a product of the 70s and 80s. And so certainly some of the writing style and some of the things that come up and the tropes are very reminiscent of that time, 30, 40 years ago. And, as a modern reader, you have to sort of set aside a few of those things. But overall, yeah, just fun, creative, very light fantasy, easy to dip in and out of, and read when I've been really tired from a lot of travel. So that was fun. Okay, then a book that was incredibly disappointing is The Paper Magician by Charlie N. Holmberg, which I listened to on audio. And I guess it's young adult, but like parts of it were sort of dark and disturbing, especially in just like the imagery was very dark and gory at parts. But I didn't mind that. But The book is really interesting. So it's set in a world that's reminiscent, I guess, of like Victorian London, maybe, but with a whole lot of anachronisms that drove me crazy. There were so many pieces of dialogue where the characters were just using totally modern, idioms and sayings and phrases. And they would reference things that weren't appropriate for that time period in London, but without any world building that would give us context for like, this is like that time in London, but not. Aside from the fact that there's magic, but there were like other things where it was just like there's no reason to reference that. So it sort of failed on the historical fiction or historical fantasy front in that respect, and kept pulling me out of the story. And then the premise is really interesting. The magic system is really interesting. So in this world, teenage magicians are bonded to a particular medium, and then they can only do magic with that medium for the rest of their lives. And so our main character, Sione, I forget her name now, she is bonded to paper, and she's sort of assigned to be bonded to paper and become a paper magician. And she's really grumpy and annoyed about it because she's a teenager, because she really wanted to do cool stuff like, work with metals and that sort of thing. But she's, sort of shuttled off to go be a paper magician and study with sort of a hermit expert paper magician who is a guy in his 30s. You can maybe see where I'm going with this. So then pretty early on, we've established that the book is headed towards a teacher-student romance, or at least an attempt at a romance on her part. And on the face of it, like, there's a lot that's understandable in that. Like, of course, a young teenage girl, like, it would be perfectly natural for her to have a crush on, a mentor who's teaching her and taking care of her. I mean, I was a young teenage girl who had crushes on some of my teachers. Like, that is definitely sort of a natural thing. But it's clearly treated like very seriously in the book, if that like it's clearly headed towards a real romance, and it's just like, it's the 21st century. Like, can we not do it? And then it's done in like really problematic ways. So really early in the book, she starts cooking for this dude and doing his laundry, and it's sort of set up as like, oh well, she almost went to culinary school instead of becoming a magician, so this is totally something she's interested in and passionate about. And it's like, okay, maybe, but then by the time she's starting to do his laundry and his grocery shopping, just like, no. So yes, I do not recommend that book. I will not be proceeding with the series. Okay, so then the final book that I haven't talked about before on my channel is The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu. And this was really interesting. It's sci-fi with some interesting physics elements. It's sort of a futuristic look at like the end of humanity and the possible future of our planet. And there's a lot of, it's one of those sci-fi books that sort of just weaves in a lot of philosophy about, who we are and why we exist, and, what would happen if we encounter beings that operate on just a totally different just a totally different way of being in the universe. I don't know how to explain it. And I don't want to get into too many details because it's one of those books where you discover things as the characters discover them, and you explore them, you think through them as the characters think through them. And a lot of other people have talked about this book on BookTube, probably in better ways than I have. So it was really interesting. It didn't quite hit a top level for me, because it was just so much the case that the author was clearly using the story and the characters to like explore these big ideas, which is great, except that the characters really didn't act like people, like, at all. I mean, they're literally just microphones for exploring these ideas. So it was really interesting, well written, intriguing. I probably will continue with the series at some point, but it's definitely not like a story in the way that I tend to look for when I'm reading, if that makes sense. I also listened to it on audio, and I think it's just a bit too like slow and thoughtful for it to have really worked for me on audio. So I think if I do continue with the series, I will probably try to go back and read the print version of this one. I think it's a trilogy. So we'll see. Okay, and then briefly, I just want to mention the two books I've already talked about on this channel. So they were two science fiction short story collections, and I will link to my video where I talk about them in depth down below. But the first one was The Memory Librarian by Janelle Monae, which it was like absolutely fantastic. It could be a contender for my best book of the year. And then the other collection is called The Assimilated Cuban's Guide to Quantum Santeria by Carlos Hernandez. Excuse my pronunciation. And that one was also really quite good, like very solid, excellent stories. A few of the stories were like amazing. Yeah, I also just really enjoyed that one. So I highly recommend those two short story collections. If you're interested in science fiction short stories in general, please go check out my video where I talk about those in more detail down below. All right, I will sign off with that. That was my June reading month. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.